Hello and welcome to Bangladesh Today. I am Avneet Arora. The ongoing war crimes trial in Bangladesh has put the future of the country's main Islamist party in jeopardy. We talked to senior international journalist Francis Harrison and Britain and Sri Lankan academician Rohan Gunaratna on the situation of the Jamaat and the upcoming general election. Over 3 million people were killed and some 200,000 women were raped by the Pakistani army and those opposed to the freedom struggle. The War Crimes Tribunal, which was set up in 2010 by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, was mandated to prosecute the guilty, even though 10 of the 11 sentenced belonged to the Jamat-e-Islam, which is an ally of the opposition BNP. The tribunals have so far sentenced 6 prominent Jamat-e-Islam leaders and a senior BNP lawmaker to death. The Jamaat and its allies went on a rampage in protest against the conviction of their leaders, destroying public property, burning vehicles and clashing with police personnel. Francis Harrison, a visiting fellow at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies or ICWS in London, was of the view that the trial of those accused of committing war crimes during 1971 Liberation War has impacted Bangladesh's polity.
A huge spate really of attacks on Hindus in February in the wake of one of the verdicts in the war crimes trial. And I think that's something to look for in terms of the elections. If they go ahead, then attacks on minorities probably will be something that may happen again and are a serious concern, because obviously those things shouldn't happen. What's happening with the war crimes trial is it's bringing up all these issues again. I mean, it's having a huge impact on obviously Jamat-e-islam and its future as a political party, its top leadership obviously being on trial, and then that's impacting politics in all sorts of unpredictable and really fascinating ways. So you've got the emergence of the Shahbaz movement and then the way that developed, which was something that was totally unpredictable, and the fact that you had these madrasa boys from Jamat-e-islam coming onto the streets, that was something that nobody, when I first went to Bangladesh early in the year for the research for this project, nobody mentioned Jamat at all. It just was not on the agenda when you discuss political Islam, and then a month or two later there's 100,000 of them on the streets in Dhaka. So the unpredictability of different Islamic forces in a way fighting for the space, coming together, being divided, it's very, very complex. There are kind of doctrinal differences of opinion within the Islamic fold between these groups, and yet sometimes they form alliances against more what they would call atheist forces or more secular forces outside there. So it's a moving feast. I don't know quite where it will end up. It will definitely impact the elections in some way, but everything is extremely fluid and unpredictable, and that was one thing that really sort of struck me, how quickly things have changed, are changing in Bangladesh month to month.
Harrison also said that the elections in the country due early next year had both main parties with a lot to play for, and the role of the Jamaat will also be crucial. Bangladesh is expected to go to polls anytime between October 2013 and January 2014, as Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had hinted last month.
Whether the elections will happen on time, who knows, but we'll know by October 24th if they're called, so it's not long to wait. But I think what's so fascinating about Bangladeshi politics at the moment is the unpredictability. It's really high stakes. There's everything, it's win or lose, everything to play for the political parties, and for the democratic process and the system to work, with all its flaws. There needs to be elections. There need to be elections that are credible and free and fair, and that people participate in. It depends on who you speak to. Obviously, people are very politicized and very polarized, and you see that in the bureaucracy, in journalism, in obviously in the political parties. Across the board, if somebody's pro-Awami League or pro-BNP or pro-Jamaat, it's pretty obvious. And I think that's quite an issue, that it's become kind of a zero-sum game. There's so much to play for that. For people who've supported the Awami League, if BNP and Jamaat come to power, they lose everything. They could actually physically be at risk. They're worried about their security if they're journalists, if they're on, death list, hit list, that kind of thing. They worry about whether they'll have to actually leave the country. The stakes are so high on both sides, and obviously on the other side there are the same sort of issues. That I think it's quite difficult to find someone who is, in the middle, really. Because it's very personal for everybody.
She also said that Bangladesh was sending ripples through a new wave of movement that might look for a change in the political system in the country. Bangladesh has been witnessing a people's resurgence movement ever since its International Crimes Tribunal started pronouncing capital punishments to those accused of atrocities during the country's 1971 liberation war. Dhaka's Shahbag Square turned into a nucleus of all political demonstrations and protests from Bangladesh's civil society, which demanded swift trials for 1971 war crimes accused.
Third force, and I think people pointed to the Shahbag movement in terms of youth participation in politics as initially in the very beginning days as a positive thing, that people, particularly young people who were not interested in politics, suddenly became motivated, but then clearly it went off in a different direction. So the absence of a third force is something that people really bemoan. But having said that, you know, there's still many things about Bangladesh that are very dynamic and positive. You know, there still is quite a bit of space for freedom of expression, I would say. I mean, the risks are very high for many journalists, but they are pushing the limits daily, and more so than in some countries in the region. And there is this entrepreneurial kind of drive. You know, you see the economy flourishing, the garment factories, you know, it is really dynamic in a way. So when ordinary people are not fettered by the politics, you know, on a private level, they can, you know, really push forward and achieve a great deal. So there's still a lot of intellectual debate about how the country should develop, and a great deal of dynamism about it, and tolerance and freedom, which you kind of forget when you discuss these very grim issues around holding elections and the identity of the country.
Harrison further said that the Jamat-e-Islami was not really interested in the upcoming polls, as it was looking to influence people, especially women in the rural areas of the country. The Jamat-e-Islami is systematically functioning to embed itself in the country's political system, she claimed.
You know, the Islamic parties are playing a very slow, long waiting game. You know, they're not bothered about whether they have a prime minister or they win the elections so much. They win the same sort of general vote block each time. But they are doing a lot of outreach work, and in villages they're sending women to do, you know, education classes on the Quran, and with that sometimes comes politics as well. So they're kind of, it's a creeping, slow process for them, and they're in it for the long game, in a way that politicians are worrying about the next poll.
The coming months are crucial for the Awami League government. They need to ensure free and fair elections and also make sure the war crimes trials go on smoothly and are not derailed. Meanwhile, terrorism expert and academician from Sri Lanka, Rohan Gunaratna, was of the view that banning the Jamaat-e-Islami was a major achievement for Bangladesh and that the Islamic outfit had no place in a secular society. In August this year, a high court in Bangladesh had banned the Jamaat from contesting elections. The verdict came as a major blow to the Islamist party and its ally, the BNP. They instantly filed an appeal in the Supreme Court and also hit the streets in protest against the High Court ruling.
I personally said that the current wave of extremism cannot be fought by military, intelligence and law enforcement. Civil society must come together. There must be a greater participation of academia, of the NGOs, of community leaders. In Bangladesh, terrorism has been very effectively dealt by the police, intelligence and military. DGFI, NSI, Rapid Action Battalion, they have done a very good job with regard to terrorism, but not with regard to extremism. With regard to extremism, there must be greater harnessing and greater linking up of forces between the academic community, between the media organization, the religious organization, the educational institutions. This part is lacking. Traditionally, Bangladesh has been a very tolerant and a very moderate society, because the Bengali culture is one of embracing syncretic Islam. But this is changing. Today there are forces of extremism. The attacks against the Buddhist temples in Ramu, some other disturbances clearly suggest that the ideas of extremism is coming from overseas, from outside, beyond the borders of Bangladesh and affecting the local people of Bangladesh. And there must be greater mobilization on the part of the non-governmental institutions to fight this wave of extremism.
Gunaratna also said that the extremist and militant groups in Bangladesh have emerged from the ideological umbrella of the Jamaat-e-Islami.
The Jamat-e-Islami ideology has formed the seedbed, the foundation for the emergence of extremist and terrorist groups in Bangladesh. If not for Jamaat-e-Islami, so many people would not have been radicalized. And we have seen the emergence of JMB, Jamiatul Mujahideen Bangladesh, Hujibi, Harakatul Jihadi Islami Bangladesh, a number of other groups. Largely the extremist ideologies are emanating from the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. And the genesis, the very origins of this dates back to the anti-Soviet multinational Afghan Mujahideen campaign that was waged from December of 1979 for 10 years. So the remnants of these groups of this campaign formed Al-Qaeda, Tariq-e-Taliban Pakistan, Afghan Taliban, number of groups. And today the current wave of global extremism and terrorism is largely a vicious byproduct of the anti-Soviet multinational Afghan campaign, which was funded by the Saudis and also by Western countries, including the United States.
The Jamaat-e-Islami is a very well organized and cadre-based party which, other than having played a violent role in the 1971 Liberation War, has tried to subvert and obstruct the political process in the country. The Sheikh Hasina-led Awami League government has stood up to the pressure tactics of the Jamaat and has not succumbed to their aggressive ways. With elections round the corner, the Jamaat will probably intensify its protests, and the onus is on Prime Minister Hasina to ensure a peaceful national election. That is all we have for in this week's episode of Bangladesh Today. Thank you for watching.